I remember writing the poem The Immigrant Child, the one I'm most known for the world over. And it was a Sunday evening. I had just missed the bus coming back from Walmart. I had about 6 of those Walmart bags on my shoulder because my kids would not be seen anywhere near the bus with groceries. They were the cool kids in the cool neighborhoods, right? And I gave them that. It's my journey and I'm pulling them along. But I'm there, I'm walking with the bags and I just missed the bus. So I have about 45 minutes wait. And instead of sitting there moping as I'm crossing the street, I heard my grandfather's voice. You're going to Canada, the land of milk and honey. And I allowed that to be the fuel for the most brilliant poem, The Immigrant Child. Sat there on the bench and I wrote the poem. By the time the bus dropped me home, the poem was done. And it's the poem that had me opening for Michelle Obama, our Prime Minister, the Jamaican Prime Minister.
I saw the exercises that you went through with the room to energize the room, and then you delivered it beautifully. And then I watched the energy in the room, and then what I watch is, after you were done, what was the impact on the room? And the room was different, like forever different, right? And you do this over and over, and so you obviously, there's technique in there that you're clearly using. You've picked this up. Either some people are gifted with it, but some people learn it as they go along because through your experiences, you're like, that didn't work, or then I'm going to do something different next time.
I think it's just being myself, being authentic, being real, not being afraid.
Yeah, well,
like
absolutely.
Not having any sort of fear. And I hardly pre-plan my presentations. I hardly ever create a PowerPoint or what have you.
Right.
I show up as my authentic self.
Yeah.
And I just work organically.
So it's funny. I was literally just having a conversation with two of my leaders who I work with, and they were talking to me and saying, "Hey, MK, next time we do this, we just had a really great event." And I said, "Next time, can you just like give us a little more notice? You know, it would be nice if we had a little more notice to plan." And I was like, "But you do realize the fact that you had less time meant that that's when your creativity really got to come out."
To come out, yeah.
And while it is a little stressful for some when you're not used to being creative, but in your creative moment and that's your true self coming out.
Absolutely.
And it's a beautiful thing.
It's authentic, and that is, there's beauty in authenticity.
100%.
Right? Yeah.
But you weren't always like that. Or were you, like you say...
I would say I have always been like this.
You picked it up at
childhood.
An early stage in life.
Very early.
Now, the thing is like many people, some people remember this, some people don't, but you remember.
Very much so.
And you remember it goes back to when? To where?
Childhood.
So childhood, describe that. Where was it?
Rural Jamaica, St. Mary Parish in the country. 11 auntie and uncles and grandparents. Oh, the love that I received from those folks.
Right.
So my mom
your
left.
Aunties and your uncles. Okay.
Aunties and uncles and grandparents,
so
and my brother and cousins.
Okay.
So my mom left me as a baby for the greener pastures of Canada.
Oh.
Greener pastures of Canada. Now I yearn for the greener pastures of Jamaica.
Oh. So you're in Jamaica. How old were you?
So I left when I was born there, and I left there at 15.
Okay, but when did your mom leave?
My mom left in 75. That's what her passport says.
Okay.
But even before 75, she left where we were to live with an uncle who was a part of the Windrush, who would travel back and forth to England. And so that's how the Canadian opportunity came about for her. So she really left me in infancy.
So you were a child?
I have no memory of her until I met her at 15.
Okay.
She didn't have landed status, so she didn't come and go from Canada.
She had to come to Canada. She took the leap. She had to get separated from you. I'm sure that wasn't easy for her. Little do we know, right? We feel like they left us, but that's not easy for them. But then she leaves you with a very amazing environment with your uncles and aunts and cousins.
And
when you're a kid, as much as you miss your parents, you must have, that sounds like a really good time.
It truly was. It truly was. And she took very good care of us. We were barrel babies.
Okay, barrel.
So every, 2-3 times a year, we would get barrels. When people traveled back and forth to Canada, we had people in the community that traveled. They came back with suitcases. So when kids were going to school bare feet, I had 2 and 3 and 4 pairs of shoes to choose from. When I look back on my childhood pictures, I'm dressed to the nines. I'm wearing gold necklaces when kids are swimming in their underwears in the rivers. I have on a full bathing suit, different
What
ones.
does barrel babies mean? I didn't.
So barrels, shipping barrels across the world.
Okay.
It's a common thing for, I would say, I can only speak to the Caribbean experience, but
Sure.
Caribbean
That's what I'm interested in.
families
Yes.
ship barrels back home. So, Christmas is a really big time. So Christmas is coming.
Okay.
Yeah, like right now in my
Send a barrel.
garage, there's a barrel sitting in my garage. So over time, you buy things, you put in there. A bottle of oil here, you find rice on sale, you pick up 2 bags here, there, and there. And then before you know it, the barrel's full. And you ship it. Most of the time, it's like food items, but people will stuff clothes and shoes and all the things that we take for granted up here in North America. Whereas for people especially in the rural parts, it can be very, very hard, right? We went to store. We weren't buying a bottle of oil. We would buy like this much oil, right? We go to buy bread. Sometimes it's a half a bread.
Yeah.
It's not a full bread. So, so we know that there are people who are less fortunate. And so we share from the little that, or the a lot that we have, we share with others.
So this is back in Jamaica. You're getting these amazing gifts that are coming through
from my mom.
From your mom. Okay.
Yes.
So there's still that connection in
Very
that
much
way.
so. And the postcards, because at the time, there's no phones, there's no things have evolved so nicely,
Right.
but it's postcards and letters, lots and lots of letters. And I cringe every time. I'm like, why didn't I have even one of those that I kept, right? And then I remember when I left, then I would write to my grandmother, especially. We had a really tight bond. And so we would write
keep that
letters.
up.
Definitely, we kept it up.
So you were there in Jamaica with them, and I just imagine like a large playground the way you describe it.
Oh, yes. There were 28 acres of land around us.
Okay.
That was ours to play on. And this is outside of, so off the main road. So if you picture, let's picture Jamaica. Let's talk about Jamaica for a moment.
Okay.
So let's say you land in Kingston, which is the main city.
Right.
There's a main road that'll take you through the country, and the road winds like this, the most picturesque
I'm from Africa,
thing
so
that
it
you
sounds
can
like I'm
ever
going there right
imagine.
now.
Beautiful, the bamboos, like the hillside, beautiful. So but it's winding. I remember I used to get car sick a lot doing that winding drive.
Bumpy road.
And so bumpy road, not so much bumpy on the main road.
Right.
And so then you turn off. We come through this little town. So the parish is St. Mary. We come through this little town, Anotta Bay, and then we're going towards Port Antonio, which is Portland, another parish. Okay. And then we turn off into the hill, into this area called Enfield, and that's where the bumps. That's where the bumps come in. Mind you, they've done a lot of improvement, so it's a lot smoother. And we sat in the valley.
Right.
Surrounded by hills, not really mountains, hills, very, high hills.
Right. Where'd you go to school?
And then in the same area,
Okay.
It's called Enfield All Age School. So all ages. We did like kindergarten type before, when it's like a smaller setting, and then we went on to that. But in the daytime, around these 28 acres, and then we also lived on the lane that has the ball ground. And the community center. Mind you, it also contains the cemetery. Let me tell you about the stories of that. But and then there are 2 rivers that runs through the property as well.
It's beautiful.
So just amazing fruit trees, mangoes for days, almonds, all the things surrounds us. So in the daytime, my cousins and brother and I, we would do all the things, roaming the bushes, swinging from Tarzan ropes and jumping off in the rivers. And but at nights, it was all about books. And it would start to get dark, really, because we had no electricity in our home. There was electricity off of the main road, and I'm trying to remember, was there any in the lane? I think there was about 1 or 2 light posts in the lane as well. But darkness, lots of darkness. So we would observe that, we call them piniwali. This is fireflies.
Okay.
We would look out for fireflies. So under the kerosene oil lamp. So the kerosene oil lamps were fired up as it started to get dark. And that's where we would commune. Unless we wanted to go to bed at 7 or 8 o'clock, we would commune in the living room. Well, we call it the hall. And reading stories and listening to stories from my grandfather in particular. He would tell all the tales from, lots of Nancy stories and Nanny of the Maroons, which is Jamaica's national heroes and so forth. His days working on the Gray's Inn sugarcane plantation. Gray's Inn is a plantation which is not too far off from the town in Anota Bay. And so listening to those stories, reading all the books that could be found. My grandmother, when uncles and aunts started to move away into the city and their kids were going to the amazing high schools that we only dreamt of, she would bring back books and from the library, books and books and books. And I was your designated reader.
So, Nadine, it sounds like a dream, actually. Like, it's a beautiful setting. Did you at that time, do you remember ever feeling like you're missing something?
I would say so. So
even
my
though
mom,
you're living the dream.
Living the dream, there was always the anticipation of reuniting with my mom. Okay. I would always hear the stories. My grandfather in particular would often say, "You're going to Canada, the land of milk and honey." So I feel like I was prepared my whole life for this place. So I kept kind of yearning for this place and this person who was foreign to me. I had no idea. I would see pictures, of course, from the, the letters that would come in, but there was definitely that missing piece, yeah.
When you hear this, you're going somewhere, you're going, like years go by.
Definitely.
And you keep hearing this.
And you see friends leave because friends in the community are also joining with their families who've gone to the U.S. or England.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's this anticipation, which has a sense of hope that comes with it. Mm-hmm. But then you're not going yet, and you're not going. And there's a question that lingers in your mind.
Am I really going to go? When is this going to happen? Like,
right. Did that happen?
Yes, very much so.
And then
but I kept living, and life was adventurous. My grandmother, especially as I started to become a budding teenager, I wasn't far from my grandmother's side. Okay. And my grandmother was a social butterfly.
Okay.
I would go to church with her on weekends, but she would visit neighbors, and she'd be sitting on their verandas, and I would be sitting playing or doing something around, and I would hear their stories. And
your time is occupied.
Very much.
Your
very
mind
much
is
so.
Occupied. You're growing.
Mm-hmm.
There's still something like in your head going, am I ever...
When is this going to happen? Like, yes. Well, this, yeah.
Was there ever a time that you're like, I'm not going?
No, never. Never.
Was there like...
happen.
But then when you don't have that, it's almost like you can't turn it off, right? You're anticipating it.
Yes.
But then day after day or week after week, there's a feeling of frustration or disappointment when it doesn't actually happen. Or did you even have time to think that?
I don't think I even I don't have a memory of those times because there was so much good.
Yeah.
When when the older aunts and uncles started to move off into the city, and my uncle was like one of the richest people in Jamaica. He was running a very successful business. He had the mansion, he had the maids, he had the chauffeurs, and so when my grandmother would go into the city on the weekends to get provisions, there I would be with her. So I'm experiencing the maid service and that lavish life. So I started to become more aware of sort of what life is like outside of rural Jamaica. And then the day comes.
How did you find out, or when did you find out?
Actually, even before that, I had an uncle who was a soldier, and they lived in the barracks in, they call it Up Park Camp in Jamaica. Okay. And so even that was an adventure. They had a huge family, they had 7 kids. And so his wife, my aunt, had moved to Florida. So those kids, a couple of them who were close to my age, that was also a lot of fun to spend summer in Kingston, in Up Park Camp on the barracks, the mango trees, the adventure. So lots of adventures. When the day finally came, it was bitter, very bittersweet, and it was It was a surprise. It's something I stumbled upon.
Oh.
So my grandmother was known, there's something called icy mint. In fact, when I pulled up to your
I'm
door
learning
there,
so
I
much. I
noticed
love
that
this.
you have a jar of mints. So we would often raid my granny's purse for these mints, right? And I raided
We were
her
the only ones
purse.
that did that. Okay. It's just like,
I raided Granny's. I call her Mama. I raided Mama's purse for mints, and I bumped into our. I knew that the preparation was underway because we had gone to do our medical.
Okay.
We had done our
So you're
old
seeing
passport
progress.
pictures and all of those like ages ago, because it's a process that
Sure.
takes a while. And there I was, rummaging through her purse looking for icy mints, and I stumbled upon our tickets. My brother, he's 2 years older than me. And, of course, I ring the alarm. My grandmother is all teary-eyed and everything. But there is this, like, superstition in Jamaica. I don't know if it's elsewhere as well, and I'm sure it is. But if someone's going to foreign, you're not gonna verbalize, you're gonna tell anyone, because then something might happen and you don't get to go. Like, people will be envious. Like, there were these stories, people are gonna be envious of you leaving and they'll do something so you can't go, or something like this. So
I've heard the same.
and so it was very hush hush hush. And my uncle, the one that was the well-to-do one in Kingston, he was the one that facilitated these tickets. And we were leaving like within days.
Wow.
Not much time at all to say bye to friends. And there were friends who had been visiting. There are a lot of friends that I didn't get to say bye to because they weren't there in
old
the
are you at this
community at the time. I was 15.
So you know what's going on.
I
You've
totally
got a
know what's going
network,
on,
You've got
and
friends.
yes.
The social network is very important to you at that time.
Very much so. And it crashed. It crumbled. It fell.
So now all of these things, say, be careful what you wish for. You may just get it.
You may just get it.
And now you got it.
No, I got it. But it's like it's bitter. It's sweet. It's bitter. It's so many emotions, right? But the beautiful thing is, I was not alone. I feel so bad for those kids or those people who travel this road alone. So I had my brother.
Right.
So it was my brother and I hand in hand, on the waving gallery. At the time, things have really advanced where you go through the tunnel to get on the plane. But back then we were climbing up the plane stairs and there's a waving gallery kind of thing. And yeah, we did the waving to Granny and the family and my brother and I. And I was the boss of him, let me tell you. I was so proud of that. As much as he's 2 years older than me, that's a fond memory that I have in that, I have all the important documents and he's walking. And it really is essential. They say readers are leaders, and that's essentially what that was. I was very confident and self-assured and kind of, in Jamaica, some Jamaicans might say enough.
Yeah.
So I'm self-assured. And
was there a part of you that didn't want to get on that plane? Like that said,
I don't have that memory at all. I don't have the memory. I have the memory of the waving. There's excitement. There's
And so it sounds beautiful up until that point. And I'm an immigrant here. I remember the ride from the last place I lived in the car to the airport.
How old were you?
I was 8.
Oh, so you're also an immigrant child.
But but I remember what was on the radio. I remember the conversation in the car.
Wow.
I mean, some things I was staring out the window. I can tell you what was on the way. But that's all I can tell you. I don't remember much. But there is a lot of anticipation.
Very much
nighttime. There's this feeling of excitement, looking forward. But now I'm curious that you got on the plane and you got this image built up in your mind of what Canada is all about, the land of milk and honey.
Yes.
And you're also getting postcards from your mom. So you're probably getting some insights as to what life is like.
Life's like a lot of snow.
Right? But then you land. And what were your first, observations about when you started coming into Canada and landing here?
Cold. So it was December 29th.
Yeah.
So you leave KIN at 30, 35 degrees, and you're landing in minus, Baka God's face, but colds, and then my mom was there to greet us and welcome us. There was also a bit of familiarity from home in that there was this lady that would come, or at the time she was a young lady that would travel back and forth, spend summer down there. She was the one that would bring a lot of suitcases and stuff. So she came as well. And so that sort of familiarity, and we settled into my mom's 1-bedroom apartment at Weston and Eglinton. My brother started to go to George Harvey, and I went to Weston. I can't even remember why the difference, but I went to Weston Collegiate. And I remember dressing up in my mom's because my mom was a fashionista like nobody's business. And so I remember dressing up in her long, pretty gowns to go to school. I quickly realized that's not how Canadian children dress at all.
Right. So what were like your early recollections of, when you're coming into a new culture, when you're coming into a new land, people dress different, talk different, sound different, have maybe even different things that they do in a day. Did you just come in because you might have had enough, because you might have been already self-assured? You maybe didn't have that, whoa, what do I do now? Or this isn't working, or this sense of not belonging.
So there's a bit of awkwardness at first in terms of being different. I stood out. I was very tall at the time, legs up to here and very skinny and in my mom's long gowns. I also had a space like yay wide. I had a gapped tooth that was like way. But what stands out for me is the friendships that I quickly made. One in particular, a girl named Cecile. So she was also of Jamaican background. And so whereas some people might laugh and make fun, I acquired a name, Nadine. So whereas people would, call me names or laugh or, kind of make fun, tease, what have you, she was very curious. She wanted to hear the stories of what Jamaica was like. So I quickly gained a friend in Cecile, and by extension, Cecile's friends. And we found commonalities in that we both love to sing. So in No Time Flat, I was a part of choir. I was a part of drama. Because of my height, some of the coaches thought I'd be good for their sports team, but they quickly realized, no. But I thrived in extracurricular, choir and drama, some wilderness experiences like going up north, experiences, stuff like that, like team building activities. And before long, I was as Canadian can be. Well,
it sounds like you had no problems whatsoever, and life is just one beautiful smooth ride.
I wouldn't say so. So at home, there were some challenges. There was like an experience that kind of threw. So it was awkward trying to know this stranger who was my mom at the time.
And this is it. You hadn't seen her in how long?
I didn't know her. It's like I had no recollection of her.
But you got postcards. You're communicating.
Aside from that, but like in terms of so my grandparents were my parents.
Right.
So that bond, there was no bond. There was no bond. So that was a very, very tough sort of time. And also, as a you're a teenager, you're coming into yourself. And so I was a little bit stubborn and like self-assured and kind of knew what I wanted to do. You know what I mean? So, but she kind of spoiled us as well. She was so my grandparents, the life in Jamaica, people spoiled us because our mom's not there. And then she was trying to make up for the 15 years. So, things like making my bed, I never had to do that. Like she would do all the things. She had a friend who then we had a very awkward encounter around that. So things like hugging, right? Never something we did in Jamaica. So saying I love you, it's not a thing at all. We knew we were loved by the actions, but people wouldn't come out and say. So there was like an awkward experience that happened with a hugging situation with one of her male friends. And I being the person that I am, I voiced it.
Right.
Not at first to her, but to my brother, and then also to this other family member that had that I was very familiar with. And
Right.
of course, we then, as a group, spoke to my mom about it. And she, she asked the person denied. And so that created a bit of an estrangement because I felt like I wasn't believed. And so that was a odd, and this was like right at that early stage of coming. So that sort of laid the foundation for a bit of an awkward connection with her.
It's interesting. What I wanted to go back to was that you are anticipating coming to Canada, looking forward to coming to Canada. Your mom being here is probably one big reason.
Yes, absolutely.
Why you come here?
The only reason at the time.
The
yes.
only reason. Okay. So now you get here, and then you have this, and it's all that anticipation, that build up, that looking forward to, leading to these experiences, and it may be not going as planned.
Definitely not as planned.
What were you
But
expecting?
they I don't know, all the
What you were
sort
doing
of the
back
same
home in
sort of
Jamaica.
thing. Right, absolutely.
And life here she's maybe not exactly.
And she's
you're also-
working a lot. She
Right.
especially now there's more mouths to feed, like, so she's at work a lot.
Right.
But school,
And back home in Jamaica, your mama, your grandmother was around a lot.
very much so. She would
So-
leave on the weekends, but oftentimes when she's leaving,
Right.
I'm right behind her.
So who you consider to be like your guardian, or the way guardianship is done, versus now here in Canada, how guardianship is done is now what
It
you're
allowed me to
noticing.
find more of an independent streak, though, because
Sure.
I became more immersed in school and extracurriculars. Cecile, being of a Christian faith, started to also invite me out to her church. And
Right.
so church became my family,
Yeah, it's your center, your
my
community.
center. Yeah, absolutely.
100%. That
So
happens
it
quite a bit.
was church on Friday nights were young people nights. Saturday nights were prayer meetings. Sunday morning was Sunday school, then service, and then at night. So the whole weekend was taken up with church, and then in the week it's school.
Yeah.
So I
Keeps
really
you occupied.
definitely kept me occupied, and then it led me into another area of my life that actually brought me here today.
Yeah. But with it's interesting, you centered around the challenge that you had with your mom, something that you really wanted, but you felt now, even though you were here, wasn't complete.
Right.
To help me understand that, because I think a lot of us experience that sort of gap sometimes with our parents, or we experience that with our children, even though we're very present, or
Right.
we're around each other anyway, we would think. And this gap is something, like you say, you can't really sometimes sit there and go, hey, let's talk about solving this and
Right.
intellectualize it. You just carry on. But it's there in the back of your head.
Yes.
And even though you were going to church and you were very occupied, doing good things, it's a healthy way to stay occupied. This is something you felt was missing. How did you then, what did you do about it?
Life just kind of kept going, right? We moved from Weston and Eglinton to Jamestown in Rexdale.
Okay.
To get, proper housing situation where we each now have our own rooms. It meant switching schools. So that was also another huge kind of blow and change for me, because I'd gotten so accustomed to Weston and my friends there. So switched schools and more involved in church. I was gone all weekend. I would travel, because we were all the way in Rexdale and church was in Scarborough.
Wow.
So there was one young lady whose house I would stay at from Friday all the way to Sunday night, and then take the bus trek back home. And from there is when I entered into marriage, and that's another story, another chapter of this story. But life just kept going. I was very self-assured and confident. I had found this sort of community in the church, and that's what I really gravitated towards. And, life just kept happening. My mom kept working. Was I working? No, I started working after I left West Humber. I started working on the airport strip.
You said something interesting to me earlier as we were chatting, and I trying to see where it connects, but you talked about over time, as you were moving, you wouldn't unpack. Mm-hmm. And then, how did you say it again? Like, I forget, but
hoarding things.
Did you call it that? Did you call it hoarding? I mean, I don't know what the definition is, first of all, of what hoarding means.
Right.
But in the way you described it, is that it was just we just moved and I didn't unpack. Mm-hmm. But actually,
it's a little deeper. I discovered it to be a little deeper than that.
Well, so thinking back on it, like you're moving, you're taking the stuff with you. You know this is stuff that's useful,
right?
That you would wear, like clothes. Mm-hmm. But you wouldn't unpack it.
Wouldn't unpack it. Even now, I moved last October to my new home, and my garage has all the things. I haven't unpacked them.
I mean, they were useful.
Very much so.
You've invested into it. Mm-hmm. You're going to need to use it again.
Absolutely. I remember in the summer months, I had family members visiting, and I'm very generous. I love to give things. So I'm like, let's go look for things. And I was just so amazed. Oh my goodness, look at the things. And yeah.
You had all this, and instead of taking it out or unpacking it, you just go, you'd buy something.
Buy something new and just kind of leave it there.
And that is something like I feel like I'm the opposite of. Like me, it's like if I'm not wearing something or using something, I don't want to say I'm a minimalist, but I was just like I want it out of my sight. Mm-hmm. You know, it to me it clutters my space.
Right.
So, but you were accumulating, you were keeping this. What did you feel, if anything, that you were keeping or hanging on to or?
So at the time, I didn't. So up until I did a show with City Line, I was mentioning it to you, where Tracy and some experts had come in, and it's the first time that I actually paused and thought of it differently. I just thought it was, I just moved and I didn't unpack and I just bought new things and right. But in retrospect, looking back, I would definitely say it is. It's from that feeling of abandonment from both my mom and my ex-husband. So it has a relationship to that.
Help me understand that a little bit more, because I don't know of one person who doesn't feel at some point in time abandoned, either abandoned by a friend or in some relationship. In your case, as you're speaking about your life, it doesn't sound like you felt abandoned at all. Like you always had something.
At the time, I didn't think, it's, but the behavior that has manifested now is indicative of that trauma.
Interesting.
Right? That I've somehow internalized.
But what's interesting about most cases like that, if I want to talk to somebody, they already have this feeling to begin with. They're very, it's acute. They're aware of it. Mm-hmm. What you're talking about is something that you're experiencing unaware of it.
Very much so.
You don't feel like you're abandoned.
No.
But you feel like you're abandoned.
Mind you. Not in the parental sense. I definitely feel, and I still feel today, the abandonment of my ex-husband.
Okay.
Because of the manifestation of my kids. I have 3 adult young people now, but the behavior that they manifest now that I still have to deal with solo. So it smacks me in the face every day, knowing that if the dad was more available, or not available to me, because I'm long past that, but in a parental role, that things would be so different. So that still today affects me deeply.
And what, when you're feeling that, you're going out there, you're writing poetry, you're singing.
Yes.
To do those kind of things that require you to be like, creative. This feeling can be a block to all of that. It comes out. it can really like change your voice. It can change your expression because you're singing from like the heart. You're writing from the heart.
Right.
It's very emotional. And so if emotionally there is this sort of thing, did you feel that in any way that it impacted your ability to do the things? Like where did you see it affect?
So it affected it in a positive way because, these emotions had to go somewhere. So I'm up to my 6th book, 3 poetry and 4 I just added a 4th poetry book and 2 children's stories. And a 3rd children's stories is currently being illustrated. And so, all these it had to go somewhere. And so I married my pen. The first book is called The Culmination of Marriage Between Me and My Pen.
Wow.
So in those quiet moments, in those moments when no one's around, it's just me and the kids, I put them down to bed and I'm in a state of shock still that this is my life. Like, nobody could have told me this would have been my life. Like, I never knew anything of divorce. And so it definitely has had a positive impact. I would have not been a writer otherwise, because that's what brought out the writing. Not that I would say I would never. Who knows? But it is definitely as a result of that experience, that very low rock bottom sort of place where I'm isolated from my brother. My mom has died. I'm divorced, and so all the support system around me has crumbled because as much as I got the divorce, my brother and my mom were always there. My brother's always showing up. He's always there, always, always. We talk every day, very tight, very close. And then all of that just crumbled. No more relationship there. And my mom's gone and I'm alone. And I have these 3 young people. They were like a newborn. So I was 8 months pregnant when I was served the divorce papers. And I thought we were reconciling after a separation. But, a newborn, a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old. And so through that whole time, poetry found me.
It's amazing how you've used it, how you've turned it around. I think that's amazing. I want to talk about that. But if you can just give me a little bit more insight. You talked about like when this feeling of it, things crumbled. You have always been, it seems like your whole life, you've always had like great vibes, that you've either inherited or you've been given through the love that's been given to you. And that builds you. But when you're in that moment where you say it's crumbled, even the strongest person sits there and feels like the answer isn't clear. I don't know what to do. Did you ever have that, or did you just look at it and go, I'm going to write poetry? Like, how did it exactly happen?
So it is
for you?
knowing, it is this knowing that nothing lasts forever. My grandfather, I think he really made a poet out of me. He always had these sayings. It may be long, but it won't be forever. All kinds of different sayings, like metaphors that he would say. So between those old time sayings, between the seeing the experiences that I've had in my childhood, the bounce back, the not having bread and then having plenty the next day, my uncle driving up in the middle of the night and coming with all the goodies when we had nothing. From nothing to abundance, right? So just hope, always having hope that a better tomorrow abounds. Always, always, always hopeful. And then my deep faith in God that he will come through. He'll take me through. He took me through that. He'll come through again. So faith and hope.
Well, while you were waiting for it all to happen,
right?
You weren't waiting. You were active.
I was very active. And I did the needful. So for example, I'm now a mom with 3 kids. So running through the door at 6 a.m., and coming in at 7, 8 o'clock as a supervisor in a travel insurance firm on University Avenue, It was no longer feasible because the kids need my attention. They were starting to show signs of, what divorce does to families. And so they needed me more than than me approving an air ambulance for a lift of a whatever person goes spelunking off of the coast of whatever and broke whatever. Yeah. And so growing up in the country, accustomed to the roughest life, the outhouse, the cooking outside, the bathing in the gullies, giving up my house that sat on this ravine in northeast Brampton, that was hard. But also knowing that it's not the end, it's a journey, and it's okay to start over as many times as you have to. The journey, it's a journey. It's not a destination. And so, making the tough decisions, but the necessary ones. So gave up the running downtown after the GO train.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you.
So definitely gave up the running after the GO train. I gave up the job downtown. It meant giving up the house that sat on the ravine and taking life down to basics and living off of child support for the most part. Right? Cooking lunch for the kids and bringing it to school, and then reading them stories in the library over the lunch hour, and then one librarian taking notice and then inviting me to read at celebratory events at the school. One librarian tells another librarian, and 16 years later, I'm a poet and artist who works in schools, been invited to the University of Vienna in Austria.
It's all beautiful, but one day at a time after another
Absolutely.
after another of going through it is exhausting.
It is.
And you can stay hopeful and hopeful and hopeful day in and after day, and you can have all the faith in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But we're human beings,
mm-hmm.
and we get tired.
Mm-hmm.
And some days it's just like something breaks, like that's out of our control. And now the things that you want to be, the faith that you want to have, to be there for your kids, to give them the strength, all that strength that you have, your grandfather gave you, your grandmother gave you, you can't deliver it anymore. Because it's not just a day and a week and you can see the timeline. This is going to happen by this day. You don't know.
You don't know.
What do you say to yourself day in and day out? Do you just say to yourself, okay, have
Keep
hope
going.
tomorrow?
You keep going.
It's that simple.
You rest if you have to. I've stayed in bed a lot, sometimes a lot more than I should. But even while in bed, I'm writing. I'm writing how I'm feeling. I'm continuing to create. So I've done that. Admittedly, I've been depressed to the point where I've stayed in bed longer than I should. But
how do you know? How did you then get yourself out?
It's just it's there's nothing that gets me going faster than getting a response. So I've scattered seeds all over the fields in these 16 years on this particular journey. And on any given day, I live for any day now. Any day now, I will get an invitation to be the poet in residence for 6 months for the Ambanis or something like this. Like any day now, I live for any day now, and I'm a firm believer. I've lived it. I've had an idea. Let's say, for example, on this art installation project I'm working on, schools are down. It's summer now. How do I survive? So I get an idea like, let's reach out to museums and libraries, and I make random phone calls, and a museum says yes, and come. I have a $7,500 check for you right away.
And they all say yes, right?
No, they do not. But this is what I mean. Like, so it's like, it's the hope, and there's excitement in the journey as well when something like that, for example, happens. And so you're hopeful, that as much as you got that one, there are countless others like that out there. You just have to keep searching for it, and you'll get it.
It just reminded me of that thought that, that you talk about the perseverance, the concept starving artist. Like you really but you've turned it from starving artist to like fulfilled artist.
Very much so.
And not just the money being worth it, but
it's
more
beyond.
the experience.
It's totally beyond the money, and this is one of the reasons why I gave up that sort of milk and honey lifestyle of your regular paycheck and your stability, your house on the ravine and your car. Right. Took the bus for 10 years. It was the most beautiful experience. Some of the most beautiful experiences is running after the buses and the people that you interact with on the bus.
How do you say that's beautiful?
Oh, like it was so beautiful when I look
that
back.
as like,
So at the time, the hardship was felt. I'm not going to lie to you. I remember writing the poem, The Immigrant Child, the one I'm most known for the world over. And it was a Sunday evening. I had just missed the bus coming back from Walmart. I had about 6 of those Walmart bags on my shoulder because my kids would not be seen anywhere near the bus with groceries. They were the cool kids in the cool neighborhoods, right? And so, and I gave them that. It's my journey and I'm pulling them along, so I sort of have to respect them, right? And but I know what I'm about, so I'm there. I'm walking with the bags, and I just missed the bus, and it's Sunday evening. In fall, it was around this time, so I have about 45 minutes wait. And instead of sitting there moping as I'm crossing the street, I heard my grandfather's voice. You're going to Canada, the land of milk and honey. And I allowed that to be the fuel for the most brilliant poem, The Immigrant Child. Sat there on the bench because my notebook and pens are always near. And I wrote the poem. By the time the bus dropped me home, the poem was done. And it's the poem that had me opening for Michelle Obama, our prime minister, the Jamaican prime minister.
You read that on Emancipation Day.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And that just from that the hardship, because although I'm feeling the hardship, I'm reminded that opportunities abound here and that we have so much potential within us to create the experiences that we want for ourselves, right? We do. And that's what I'm essentially that's what I'm doing. I won't even say endeavoring to do. It's what I'm doing.
You are absolutely doing it.
Yes.
I mean, that's why I wanted to sit with you and hear it from you. But Nadine, maybe you're just gifted. You've got a special gift. Not everybody has that gift. Not everybody grew up around, a group of 11, 20 people who would sit down every night and designated you as the reader. Not everybody had that opportunity to develop that type of gift,
right,
and was given that kind of love, or would feel that they got that kind of love. When we feel abandoned, sometimes we feel completely alone. In fact,
yes,
as you talked about it right now, I thought, man, even your kids didn't want to be with you in that moment. They're not bad for it. They're
right,
they're going through theirs. You're going through yours.
They didn't approve of this journey.
So
at
you're
all.
completely,
alone,
by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And, but you lean in on your gift. As some people feel that they have nothing that pulls them up. What do they do then? What would you do if you didn't have that?
The world would be a very different place for me because I've been through dark days. And for me, it's faith. It's faith in God. It's that the faith in God and hope, knowing that it will always, there will always be an opportunity for better to come if I just keep going. There will always be a kind stranger to say, here's a bottle of water. You need anything more? Here, keep going. And then this is the other thing. When I started on this journey and I started writing for myself, I knew it was amazing. But then when I started sharing it, the encouragement, like there's maybe like one bad experience that I can remember where someone shared The Immigrant Child with their mom, and their mom was upset because they didn't want the person identifying with that as their journey because, they didn't have outhouses or what have you. So
right,
aside from that, so there are some people who, who are ashamed of their past, who doesn't want to identify with that sort of hard early upbringing, but,
sure,
power to them. That's their prerogative. But it's just all the positive feedback that I've gotten. It is also a part of the fuel that keeps me going.
What if a person's going through this and you've had positive reinforcements? You talk about like the response comes.
Yes, absolutely.
The response comes. What if the response isn't
garbage?
What if you're going through you talk about dark, it's going for a while. Where do you then draw on hope, and where do you draw? What part of the well do you go to?
So it's within yourself. So this past summer, for example, was a bit of a rough time for me. I found myself I cut off friends. So I was finding that I was turning my friends into therapists too much from all the things. And so I'm like, I'm hearing myself telling these stories and I'm like, what are they going to think of me? I got to just stop. And I did that. And I went within to find my voice, my strength, like within. And so sometimes we lean quite heavily on our support system around us, our friends, our cousins, right? I have amazing cousins whose phones are always open to me. And so sometimes we have to sort of drop off the masses and maybe lean in only to like one or two people when we're really, because people aren't always like they won't say it to your face, but you have to kind of know when, okay, it's a little much now. So just reach into yourself, like within yourself, country drives, hikes, whatever, nature. Nature is this amazing place where you can go to commune with, but it really what it is, even as I'm saying, going within yourself, it's really God, whoever God is to you. But I know who God is to me.
I mean, you can now look back on it, you see and you relish it. And now you're, like you said, you've how many books later, how many presentations later.
And I'm not done, far from done. I keep going. Just this morning, I got about 4 callbacks from calls that I made last Friday. And they're all positive, and so I keep going.
Do you ever feel that, I was just going to ask you that, but you kind of answered it and touched on it. Do you ever feel like, okay, you can stop doing this now? Or
No,
do you feel like
never.
you constantly have to feel it?
I mean, I rest. I don't take rest lightly. I rest when I need rest. But this journey, it's because I live for any day now, and until those days come, I have to keep going, right? I live for any day now because I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface of my potential, not even. And so if I just stay complacent, then this is all there is to it, and I know that there is so much more.
Of the things that you talked about in terms of the relationships and the abandonment in the past, and how you've taken it into a way to be able to write poetry, and through your poetry actually impact a lot of other people who might feel that same sense. I definitely connected when you read that poem on Emancipation Day. What other sort of challenges are you now planning to take on to help people with?
So mental health is a big one that
Really?
jumps out right at me from my own experiences, and within my family as well. But of course, I can't speak for others. They have to, one, give permission and be willing to sort of share there. But there are some challenges that I look at that's happening around me, and I'm like, my goodness, if the world could ever only experience these stories or see this side, it could shed such a bright light. But of course, people have to grow into that, come to that realization themselves. I can sort of nudge them along or suggest, but it's a very fragile thing. And so, I'm a person that's very open with my own story, but everyone's an individual, so you have to kind of give them. So I'm now sort of cautiously speaking to people around me to get them to a comfort level where they can share their experiences, for it to be healing, not just for them, but for others.
And how are you going to use poetry to do that? It's the beautiful thing about art. You don't necessarily know when or how.
It absolutely. I can't tell you that I've said, oh, okay, I've not even thought of using poetry there, because the thing with my art, it's evolved into visual art now, quite beautifully so. So it's not just writing, it's not just reciting. It is also the visual, and so that might, in fact, it's good that you've said that, because I know that is something that that others use in their expressions. And so it's essentially creative expressions for well-being. So whatever that is. So nudging the person along towards bringing out their creative expression for well-being, not just for themselves, but also to share it with others. So something that's happened is, a lot of times we are encouraging our young people to get into the trades, right? But we're not aware of some pitfalls, some huge pitfalls that's there. And some folks around me have kind of landed in one of those kind of hot water.
So what would you say to encourage others to move into artistic expression or writing? It seems like that has been a savior.
Absolutely. It truly is. It truly is. Like, you can never underestimate the power of that and how it just completely lifts you up, and when you're least expecting it. So like I said, I've scattered all these seeds all over the place, and any day now I open my email and it's a random thing from last year or 2 years ago. I bump into someone on the street, and so it's not doing it expecting. So when I started out, I'm not telling you I'm not expecting now, because I am, let me tell you. But when I first started, I was never doing it expecting a thing, except I knew I was doing it for myself. And then I just started sharing it, and it's just evolved so beautifully. Before, when I was doing this stuff, it was a lot of volunteering, and this was on the bus. I remember being invited to Niagara-on-the-Lake when I lived in Brampton, and getting up at like 4 a.m., taking the taxi to the GO station, and then the GO as far as it would take me, and then a bus. And so, it's about doing it for yourself, realizing that you are cake, and then what others add is just icing. With or without icing, you're delectable, and just keep going, right? Don't do it from what's the word? Be generous, but genuine. Be genuine in your endeavors, and then just sort of watch it evolve.
And it's wonderful to see it evolve to this point and to whatever's coming next. It sounds exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to come all the way here to share this. And I feel like it's maybe not the last time we're going to sit and talk again. There's going to be some great discoveries that you're any day now expecting. Things are going to happen. But congratulations, really, more than anything.
Thank you.
On all of your success, and not only your success, but the things that you're doing to help others succeed. Everything from people who are immigrating to people who are going through one kind of hardship or another, and really using your skill and your gift to bring them all this inspiration. That's fuel that gets people through things.
Absolutely.
And some people sometimes look at you and go, hey, it's easy for you to say, but your path and your journey has not been an easy one by any stretch. You could sit around all the love you want, but being separated from your mother, from your parents for that long a time, and then going through those initial experiences, not easy, especially the time that it all happens.
Yes.
And it happened also in addition to you leaving your homeland as well.
So the emotions of missing, your parents, really, your because although they were grandparents.
That's like climbing 3 mountains at a time. So all the power to you. Keep it going.
Thank you.
And thanks for joining us today.